Coming in at number 5, we have Shadow Dog. One Reddit user told the story of a contact she had with a demon when she was younger. Her parents had just divorced when she was a teenager. She decided that she would live with her mother in her new home. As soon as she moved in, she started to experience some paranormal activity. It started small. She'd be reading her books on her bed when she suddenly felt an icy chill take over her. Then she would feel like she was being watched by an entity that hated her, but obviously there was no one else in the room. She said when she felt this, she would leave her house and go for a walk for more than an hour. Usually by this time the feeling had passed. She then started to see shadows behind her, like there was someone stood in the room with her. This started to get worse when she would see the shadows move around her bedroom walls. They were getting bolder in their contact with her. The demon then started to imitate their family dog. She thinks this might have been a way to trick her into making a physical connection with the demon, allowing it to take full possession. The demon would make a growling noise from under her bed, like her dog was in need of help. The dog had refused to enter the room for months at this point, so she was not fooled by the demon. After this, she could not stay there anymore, with the demon becoming bolder and increasingly active. She moved in with her father and she never experienced anything paranormal again. I do appreciate that she was like, screw you mum, I'm leaving, you stay with the dog in this haunted house. Her mother's probably gone now, R.I.P. Demon got her. In at number 4, we have texting the devil. Demons could choose any form of communication with the living. They are not bound by our laws of reality. Sometimes they choose possession, others will only talk through a medium or Ouija board, but still one priest claims he is being contacted by a demon via text messages. Father Marian Rachel, a priest from Poland, claims that a demon from a failed exorcism is now harassing him. He attempted to perform the exorcism on a teenage girl but unfortunately was unsuccessful. He believed the devil is using this teenage girl to mock his failed attempt via these text messages. One of the messages that he received from the demon was, I quote, "She will not come out of this hell. She's mine. Anyone who prays for her will perish." The priest responded to this that the young girl is clearly still possessed and needs further help. The Catholic Church took this extremely seriously. Although there were some doubters, the majority of the community was extremely concerned about this young girl and her behavior since the possession began. The family of the girl cooperated fully with the church to try and save their sick daughter. They brought her back in for a second exorcism. This one seems to have been successful as far as they're aware. The priest did comment that he received a threatening message after the girl was saved from the demon. They threatened that the two would meet again and he would not be able to save himself next time. The priest, however, remains confident he has rid the world of this demon. He was calm and confident about the whole thing. I don't think I would enjoy texting with the devil. To be honest, I think it's probably the girl playing a little Halloween trick. Coming in at number 3, we have Dark Letter. Back when letter writing was still a thing that was commonly done, it was used by demons to leave messages with the living. Over 300 years ago in Sicily at the convent at Palma di Montechiero, a nun named Sister Maria Crocifissa claimed that she had been possessed by the devil. The story of what happened to her has finally been told and her letter has finally been translated. The story is told that one morning in 1676, Sister Maria woke up and found herself covered in ink. She had no memory of it but had spent the night writing letters. Others in the convent had heard disturbances from her room during the night. Some had heard screaming. One said they heard a thud as if she was fainting and hit the floor. Maria had lived at the convent since she was 15 years old. She was devoted to them and had never showed signs of possession or doubt before this incident. The letters explained that Maria was writing on behalf of the devil. He was dictating the words she wrote. The letter said it was Lucifer's plan to possess Maria and turn her against God so she could serve evil. A lot of the letters were coded in hidden messages of symbols and shapes and they had no way to translate it at the time. Today, some of the letters are still intact and the Ludum Science Center in Italy attempted to finally decode a portion of the text. The software is reportedly used by intelligence agencies for code breaking. They gave the machine the understanding of Greek, Arabic, the runic alphabet, and Latin. This revealed that the text really was devilish. It described God as a dead weight. It went on to say God could not free mortals from their fate. There is also a reference made within the writing to the river Styx, which in Greek mythology is said to separate the realm of the living from the underworld. The church was trying to disprove that the nun was ever possessed. If anything, decoding the letter proved the opposite. Maria seems to have been very lucky that the possession didn't go further. In at number 2, we have Singapore Doll. We all know that demons have an attachment to creepy dolls. There are so many stories of dolls coming to life and terrorizing families. For one unlucky neighborhood in Singapore, an old doll appeared and started to terrorize those who took it home. One Twitter user told the story to her followers as a warning. The doll first appeared leaning against a tree on a busy residential street. The doll was small and looked like an antique. Her arms were bound to her body with string, and she had a cloth across her eyes with Arabic text written across it. The girl brought the doll home and unbound her while also removing her blindfold. She said not long after bringing the doll home, she noticed that it would move around the home when left alone. She also said that she would hear it talking to itself when she left the room. It was clear to her that the doll was possessed. It soon made sense why it was bound when she found it. Although she did not know the doll's backstory, it seems the previous owner has a similar experience. She threw the doll away hoping to stop the demon from being in her home. However, when she returned, the doll was back home. It knew how to return to her home and was refusing to leave. She decided to try and bind the doll as she found it. She drove far away from her home and left the doll. Seems that the doll had been continuing this cycle. When you find and untie the doll, the demon and curse transfers to you. The owner saw someone post about finding the doll after she had left it. She saw that it had been untied and posted, "We bind it for a reason, stupid people, unbind it. It looks unhappy. Good luck to whoever did it." Her account has since been deleted, so she couldn't be tracked down for questions or for them to attempt to return the doll. The doll's current location is unknown, but its existence is now well known in the area. There have been discussions and crimes happening in the locations where the doll has been seen. Crimes that have never happened in these areas. The doll seems to communicate with other demons while alone and then whispers to its new owner when given the chance. Some suggested the doll be burned or crushed, but it is unclear if this would work. Surely someone has already tried this at some point. And finally, in at number 1 we have imaginary friend. Sometimes children have imaginary friends and we don't think anything of it, but what if their friend isn't so imaginary? One little girl from Texas named Madison had many imaginary friends when she was younger. All of her imaginary friends came as a pair. When she was 3 years old, she started to talk about a new friend. Her mother, Kelly, found this strange as this friend came around by themselves. Her new friend was called Kellum. She described him as a man around the age of 40. She said she saw him as a father figure. She started to spend a lot of her time playing with him rather than her other imaginary friends. She would build her blocks into a tower and knock them over as it made him laugh. The mother was keeping an eye on her with this latest friend but was not concerned until she started to sing an old song. At the time she didn't know how old the song was. Madison would sing the song all of the time. Her mother asked the nanny where the song is from, thinking she taught her it. She wanted to sing it with her to develop her language skills, but the nanny had never heard the song before. She had no idea where it was from. They looked into it everywhere until they finally found it online and realized it was an old song. It was released in 1892. No one in their life would be familiar with this song. She asked Madison who taught her the song. She said Kellum taught her. He sings it to his child. This shocked Kelly. This imaginary friend has an imaginary baby and he is teaching her real songs. She could not find an explanation for it. Things quickly began to get worse. Maybe Kellum had been watching Kelly figuring out he is more than an imaginary friend, but maybe he was an entity communicating with her daughter. One night Madison woke up screaming. When she was older, she told the story that Kellum was grabbing onto her arm, pulling on her. He was getting angry and frustrated that she did not want to stay up and play. She kicked him away and tried to flee the room. She was screaming as she tried to climb the baby gate. Kelly was woken up by the screaming and ran and grabbed Madison as she cried for help. Kelly looked back to the room where the curtains were blowing like there was a great wind in the room, but the windows were all closed. They fled their home. Safely relocated at their friend's home, Kelly called her stepfather, who was a pastor. He did not believe in demons, and if she had come to him sooner, the community might have labeled her a sinner for inviting this entity into her home, but she was desperate. Her stepfather told her to stay away from the home till he was done. He called her the next morning saying it was safe to return. When she got home, holy oil had been used all over the house to protect them. They both said it felt peaceful when they re-entered their home. Madison never saw any of her imaginary friends again. Now she is older and able to reflect on it. She feels the demon was talking to her, telling her stories and attempting to get her to behave badly. In at number 5 we have Old Friend. This story was told on Reddit about someone's interaction with the demon as a child. When he was around 4 years old, he moved into his new room in the home. They decorated the room, including a large mirror that covered floor to ceiling. Not long after moving into the room, he started talking to the mirror. He would talk to it for hours, playing in front of it, and it seemed that he saw it as a friend. His parents began to worry about this and wanted to know more. They asked about the mirror and he explained that it is where his friend lives. He was able to tell them what he looked like, his hobbies, and how he had died. This made the parents very concerned. They didn't want to scare him, so they went and did their own research about the house. It turns out it had a lot of paranormal activity linked to its past. People tormented by spirits or befriended and then used. They feared this friend could be a demon looking for its next victim. When they looked into the name of the friend, it turned out he was an old owner of the home who had died in that very room. They didn't believe in the paranormal before before this, but they were terrified for their child. They moved out of the house a month later, and he never mentioned his friend visiting again. Coming in at number 4, we have the mirror person. This story happened when a young girl, about 12 years old, had to get up during the night to use the bathroom. Her house was completely pitch black. She could not see anything. She made her way across the hall to reach the little bathroom at the end. When she finally got to the bathroom, she hit the light and glanced up for maybe a few seconds. She saw a face staring at her from the mirror. It was not her reflection, it was a demonic face. She said it was as if someone was stood at the other side of the glass, pressed up against it and staring at her. She screamed and ran. She was hysterical and didn't know what to do. Her dad woke up and found her. She explained what she saw and he went to investigate the bathroom. He then did a prayer session with her to calm her nerves down and protect her from whatever she had seen. The face was seared into her brain and she could not get it out. She eventually fell back to sleep. Fast forwarding to her 30s, and she had practically forgotten that night since she was so young at the time that it happened. One night she was visiting her dad for the weekend. They were sat quietly when he brings it up to her. He said, "Remember that one time you saw a face in the mirror?" The memory came rushing back to her. She felt a chill run down her spine. "Yes, I remember," she replied. "Well," he said, "I sometimes think about that night." He looked down at the floor with a serious expression. "I saw it too." He explained to her exactly what he had seen, and it was the same demon that she had seen. Neither of them could understand what had happened. She is glad that her dad kept it to himself all of those years and respects his bravery. She would have never slept in that house again had she had known the demon was real and not just something from her mind. Coming in at number 3, we have the cell phone. The interesting thing about this story is that the demon left proof of contact. Usually they go undetected or make it so no one will believe you anyway. It started when a young boy's mum bought a new home. She hadn't spent time to set the phone up yet. After a long day at work, she got home and put the phone on the counter. Her son asked if he could play on the phone. She saw no harm in this and just told him not to make any calls or send any messages. At around 11:20, she began to get tired and wanted to tuck her son into bed before she went off to sleep. When she got to his room, he wasn't there. He never sleeps anywhere but his bed, so this was surprising. Starting to feel panicked, she looked around the rest of the home. She finally found him asleep on her bed, still clutching the phone in his hand. She picked the phone up to inspect what he had been doing on the phone. At first she didn't notice much, just a few minor changes. The background had changed and there were a couple of new apps. She was looking through the pictures as he had been playing around with the camera. She began deleting the pictures until she got to the most recent one. It was a picture of her son, but it was taken from above. The angle was taken as if the phone was floating above the bed. If this wasn't disturbing enough, there was also an elderly woman's face in the corner of the image. There were no explanation for how any of this happened. Who was the woman? As she shared her story, others reached out to explain this is a sign that a demon is in her home. Coming in at number 2, we have the goodbye. One Reddit user told the unsettling story from a family member saying goodbye. It all started when their grandmother passed away. The Reddit user was Jewish, and so the family always participated in Shiva when a loved one passes away. This is a 7-day mourning period. You build a shrine for your loved one and sit by it for 7 days to allow them to say goodbye. Friends can come and visit during this period, with the direct family members staying by the shrine and holding a service each day. They would have an hour of silence each night at 7 p.m. to allow their passed on loved one to say goodbye to them. The first 6 days passed and nothing out of the ordinary happened. They mourned and had their hour of silence. On the final day, something strange happened. Something felt different during the silence on the 7th day. The room felt cold. As part of the shrine was the grandmother's most cherished vase. It was valuable to her, which is why it was present for the shrine. After the room felt cold, a couple of the family members looked at each other in confusion. The next minute, the vase flew off the table and smashed to pieces on the floor. Everyone was stunned. The vase had been sat there as long as they had remembered, without any risk of it smashing. It felt like something was in the room with them. It was as if it knocked over the vase to make its presence known. It didn't feel like it was the grandma though. She would never have broken that vase. The next moment, the doors to the home all slammed shut at the same time. At that moment, the feeling of being watched disappeared along with the cold spot. The family shrugged it off as a coincidence and nothing more. But could it have been that the grandmother saved them from the dark entity who felt welcomed into their home? After the doors slammed, the house felt at peace, as if the grandmother had helped them and then simply said goodbye and passed on. And finally, in at number 1, we have ancient Athens. This story dates back to the Roman Empire in 113 AD. The story was well documented, so it's still told today. There was one large and roomy home in Athens that no one would live in. It had a bad history of hauntings and paranormal activity. It was seen as a dark, evil place that no one could understand, so they all avoided it at all costs. Others who lived around the home would often tell of the loud noises of iron clashing in the dead of night. Sounds like like the rattling of chains. Some had even noted that they had caught glimpses of an old man with a long beard and disheveled hair through the house's windows. For a long time the house sat empty as no one was brave enough to investigate. Back then little was known about the paranormal. People avoided discussing the house, but those that did believed the home held a demonic spirit. No one wanted to risk getting cursed by the demon. The owner of the home often tried to rent the home out for a cheap price. When the philosopher Athenodorus heard about the story, he decided to rent the home. He wanted to investigate and confront the demon if he had the chance. He arrived for his first night in the home, skeptical if the stories would be true as it seemed to be far-fetched. On his first night the entity appeared. It was an old man as described with chains attached to him shackling him to the floor. He was screaming, although he didn't hear the scream as he would from the living room. It sounded distant, like it was only in his head. The entity disappeared after a short period of time. Athenodorus marked the spot where he had appeared. In the morning he ordered that spot be dug up. After digging for a short while they came across some old remains. They had been in there a long time. Although they had decayed, you could clearly see the chains where they had been attached to the ground. These were the remains of the entity, a tortured soul that became demonic through their demise and being forgotten about under their home. The remains were given a proper burial. After this the spirit was never seen again in the home. It was believed to have finally been able to pass on. And at number 5 we have Happy Birthday. A young family moved home into a house that they were aware someone had passed away in. The old man had died unexpectedly of natural causes when he was in his mid-40s. He passed away right in the middle of the living room. The couple had a daughter who was 2 years old. Soon after they moved in, she began to speak about ghosts that live in the home. Halloween had just passed and they thought she was just being an impressionable child. Her favorite book at the time was a Halloween-themed picture book. They assumed the talk of ghosts came from reading this book so often. She was always telling them stories about the ghost in her playhouse or playing on the stairs. She would even point to them in the corner of the room and tell them he was standing there. She was never afraid of the ghost, so they didn't seem concerned about it. The mother told the ghost that he was welcome to stay, but also that he was welcome to go if he wanted. They figured if he was a happy, friendly ghost, there was no harm in it. The couple were unsure if they believed the ghost was real until one day. It was a cold, rainy day and they were getting ready to go to daycare. Their daughter said that the ghost was out on the back deck. She said, "It's the ghost's birthday today. We need to sing him happy birthday." Again, thinking this was her obsession with birthdays, they sang along, wishing the ghost a great birthday. As they were leaving, the little girl made a comment to her parents. He said, "You guys should be careful, or the bad guy might get you guys too." This comment seemed a little off. She had said only positive things regarding the ghost so far, but this seemed like a sinister warning. After they dropped her off at school, they looked up the previous resident. The mother was shocked to find out that it was his birthday the day he died. She didn't believe in ghosts, but how would the little girl know this? His death was unexpected at a young age, so he could be warning about something sinister in the home. If there was already one ghost, it could be there was something not as friendly, also able to communicate with the family. Coming in at number 4, we have shadow people. Auspicious, the Reddit user, often suffers from eye migraines. She explains that this means she doesn't feel the pain of the migraine, but she often sees shapes and auras in the room. There was one day when she knew a migraine was coming on for her. She started to see shapes like shadows around her room. She didn't think anything of it at first, as this is something that she has experienced many times. But she noticed one of the shadows was not moving around her eye like the others. This one resembled a man against the wall. She suddenly felt a cold breath on her neck. She moved her hand to feel it when she felt like something grabbed her hand. She ran out of the room, terrified. It was hard to deal with the situation and run while she was dealing with the migraine, as it can affect your ability to move around. She called her boyfriend to come around and explained how terrified she was. He looked around the room and sat in the room alone for a while to make her feel at ease. He felt no presence or paranormal feelings while he was in there. She was adamant it was a demonic presence. She felt the cold breath chill her whole body and she had no doubt. She refused to ever sleep in that room alone ever again. Coming in at number 3, we have premonition. This one is more of a helpful contact than a bad one, but it is so crazy that it deserved a spot on the list. It happened when a young boy was 7 and his brother was 4. They were with their mother in their car. They were on their way home like they would on any other day. He was playing with his brother in the back of the car as they usually would. They pulled the car into drive and suddenly felt the air go cold. Their mother's expression dropped as if she had just seen a ghost. She slowly turned to look at her children and told them to remain silent and not to move. Being young, they didn't understand and asked what was happening. She said they needed to be quiet for a little longer. She suddenly reversed the car off the driveway and drove away as fast as she could. She rang her husband, who was a cop. She told him to get to the house now. He was attempting to ask why, but she just adamantly told him to do it now. She drove around for a little longer, scrambled by what had just happened. All the while, the children had no clue what was going on. She finally drove back home and pulled into the driveway. There was a man being handcuffed and taken away. As they entered the home, the cops and her husband wanted to know what happened and what she had seen when she pulled onto the driveway. What she said stayed with the young boys. She said she didn't see anything. When she pulled onto the driveway, she felt an entity with her in the car, and they told her a premonition that someone was waiting for her outside of her home with a knife. That if she did not turn around, he would pull out a 12-inch blade and force the family into the home. They told her she needed to take her children and run, or something tragic was about to happen to all of them. The detective and her husband were speechless. They had just arrested a man outside of the house matching the exact description she gave, and he had on him a 12-inch blade. She still doesn't know who the entity was or why they would warn her about the fate of her family, but she was forever grateful and in shock about what had happened to her. Coming in at number 2, we have Ouija board. Just in case anyone needs to hear it, never use a Ouija board. This story started when a group of high school kids decided they would go to an abandoned building with a Ouija board on Halloween. It is said that on Halloween the barrier between the living and the other side is thin, meaning that more paranormal events can happen. It is easier for spirits and demons to pass over to the living realm during the night of Halloween. The group of kids decided they would go around 3 AM on Halloween to try and connect with the spirits. Being kids, they were not completely prepared for what might happen. They had done a little research on using a Ouija board, but they were not prepared for what happened. They arrived and prepped for their game. They lit candles and all joined in a circle. They asked if anyone was there. The pointer moved and it said yes. They asked a few more questions, but nothing was clear to any of them. The movement became erratic and the pointer flew off the board and all of the candles blew out. They all became scattered and they forgot to close out their game. If you don't say goodbye, you risk inviting any spirits back home with you. Although they were spooked, they figured it may have been a prank by one of the group. They laughed it off and all went home. The real horror came later once one of the boys went to sleep. He said something happened to him during the night. He woke up feeling uncomfortable. He described his vision as feeling like TV static, a feeling of heaviness surrounding him. He looked around the room and that's when he saw a bloody and charred face with red piercing eyes looking at him through the window. When he saw the face, it smiled at him. He then heard a voice in his ear, like the demon was right behind him as he sat up in bed. The voice said, "You wanted to talk to me." The boy ran from the room as fast as he could. He stayed awake until daylight. He returned to his room and saw no sign of the demon. He called his friends who all had bad experiences that night as well, but each different. They were all shaken and vowed to never use a Ouija board again or even speak of that night. And finally, in at number 1, we have old skin. This one might at first seem like just a bad dream, but it turned out to be much more terrifying than that. One Reddit user told the story of a bad dream that she had had once. She had been having this dream every day for about a week. It started with her being lost in the woods. She didn't recognize the location. She was approached by a decrepit old man. He wore a big coat and a top hat. The shadows made it hard to make out his face. He referred to himself in the third person. He told her that his name was Old Skin. After he introduced himself, a pack of wolves would appear from nowhere. He would say to her, "Old Skin's gotta get away from the wolves." The wolves chased him through the woods as she followed. Eventually the wolves caught him and he continued to narrate what was happening. He spoke in a monotone voice and said, "Old Skin is being eaten alive. Old Skin is going to die." She then wakes up. She has the feeling like she is falling and then wakes up in a sweat. The weirdest part about the dream is that when she finally spoke to her brother about what had been happening and why she had not been sleeping well, he turned to look at her and asked, was his name Old Skin? He then went on to explain how he had been experiencing the exact same thing. They were both shaken. They couldn't understand how they could have a shared dream. The only explanation they could find was that there may be demon's energy in that home. They both sleep in the same house and you're most vulnerable when you sleep. They believed it was a message from the demon to them. Once they said his name out loud, the demon never haunted their dreams again. I wonder what might have happened if they had both kept their nightmares to themselves.